looking at these birds and the footage we've seen so far, we've been shooting behind them the whole time. And I thought that the typical waterfowl gear and equipment would work out there. But obviously we're doing things wrong. So let's start by breaking down the gear and equipment and talk about what could hopefully make us more successful out there during this trip, especially coming into the season this fall. So let's start with choke tubes.
Perfect. That's a great place to start. Industry standard, and pretty much for all the higher end guns, they have notches. And you can see here, number of notches is going to tell you what that choke tube that you have in your gun or what you're about to put in will actually accomplish. So you always have to remember that you got lead and you got steel. All right, so lead actually shoots a lot tighter than steel does when it comes out of a choke tube, either a constriction choke tube or more of a notch style choke tube that'll stop the wad as it comes out, but
sure,
different animal. So for steel, since you're hunting waterfowl, that's what you got to shoot. You can see here, if you got one notch for steel shot, you can see it doesn't even offer it because that's actually too tight. You wouldn't be able to shoot steel through that. So if you ever have a single notch on your choke tube and you're going to shoot steel, don't do it. You're going to plug it into your barrel. I've done it a few times. So you go right over. Your first one's going to be 2 notches, and that's going to get you a solid full. That's what that star is going to mean, is that it's going to be a very full choke. And technically, it'd be almost like shooting a turkey choke, and that's just too tight. You don't want to have that. Because if you do shoot too tight, it will blow your pattern out. Instead of being too wide and it scatters, it'll scatter itself on the inside and kind of knock all the pellets out. It sucks.
Interesting. Okay.
So most common for shooting ducks is 3 and 4 notches. Full choke for ducks that are moving quickly or high flyers, pass shooting, whatever it might be. And then modified is the most common because that's actually your even ground. There's a lot of people that shoot improved cylinder, which gives you a lot broader of a pattern, but sometimes not enough pellets to actually make a kill shot.
And you can find these notches right here on the exterior of your cylinder, just on the outside right here, and you'll see them lined up right next to each other. And in this case, for these sea ducks, we wanted a 3 or a 4-notch cylinder. Yeah. And Owen, you also mentioned that there's a few different types of choke tubes out there. What do you got in your hand?
Well, there's a couple of different manufacturers. These are actually heavy shot tubes, and what they do is they actually distinguish them on the tubes themselves, where it'll say MR for mid-range, and ER for extended range. This is what we would consider to be a full choke. If we were on a day just like what you were hunting, for sea ducks, you're generally shooting 30 to 40 yards for those birds, and they are flying. Well, obviously they're flying, but they're flying super fast.
Right.
So an extreme range would be the one that you would want to shoot. Tighter pattern.
Okay.
Your speed is always going to be the same. We'll talk about that later, but extreme range, that's basically just a tighter choke tube. It's designed for steel. Mid-range is what I shoot 99% of the time over decoys for puddle ducks.
Gotcha.
A couple things that folks need to remember too is that there's different types of choke tubes. You have constriction choke tubes like what these are from heavy shot, but you also have wad stripper types, and this is a pattern master.
Okay.
This is generally what I spend most of the time in my Beretta shotgun, and in my Benelli I shoot the heavy shot tubes. And the only reason why is once you pattern them, every shotgun's different.
Right.
And each tube in each shotgun's different. So by putting this tube in my Benelli, it doesn't pattern very well. You put this tube on my Beretta, it patterns perfect. So it all comes with going out, taking the time, and actually shooting that target so that you know what's going on. But again, there's lots of different ways to figure it out. Most common are going to be these notches. Along with that, other manufacturers are going to have different ways to distinguish that, and they say it right on the side. Sometimes they're etched in, or they just say it on the side, so when you pull your tubes to change them, you know what you're going to.
So you mentioned something important here about getting the right pattern.
Yeah.
And we just talked about choke tubes. Let's talk about what constitutes a good pattern. So let's start with, at our range that we were targeting these ducks in the 20 to 40 yard range, what type of pattern, where do we want the majority of our pellets going?
Well, obviously you want it to be, if this was the bird here, what you want to see at 40 yards is about 30 pellets in this zone at 40 yards. Now, you're going to have a pattern that's going to be all the way out here. And that's all scattered. That's just all pellets that aren't really obviously going to do anything for you. This is the zone in here that's really important. So you're going to want to see roughly 30 some odd pellets in this area. Now you might only have 5 or 6 pellets that'll be actually in the kill zone. Some are going to be in the wing area or tail area, whatever it might be. But if you get 4 or 5 pellets in that kill zone, the bird's done. Rule of thumb again is 3 to 5 pellets, and you're going to take down
Sure.
A waterfowl bird. So it's generally, that's what you're shooting for.
So Owen, we have our pattern dialed in. We know what we need, but we also need to discuss what makes the proper round to use out there for these birds.
Sure.
You know, in most cases when I'm out there hunting waterfowl, I'm using a 3-inch number 4, possibly number 2s if they're reaching out a little bit further.
Sure.
But it seemed like in these birds, the number 4s didn't
Not
cut
enough.
it. Not even close. Like you said, they're ammo eaters.
Yeah.
And so let's break down what people are going to find on the box. So this obviously is just a diagram of what we're going to be using. You have
Sure.
a couple boxes in your hands, so we can break it down a bit more. But let's start out with the numbers and what they mean on a box of ammo.
Sure.
So when you're out there looking for your ammo for your shotgun, start by looking at these 4 or 5 numbers that are on every single box. Obviously, you want to match the gauge to your weapon. This is a 12 gauge here. And most guns will shoot a 2 3/4 or 3-inch round.
Right.
Now in this case, I personally would suggest using a 3-inch, and if your gun shoots it, even a 3.5. Now I know that that's more expensive,
Sure.
but it's more pellets.
It can be. Sometimes you end up with, the same amount of lead or same amount of steel in there, which is where, your ounce is going to tell you. Most common is 1 1/4 ounce, 3-inch rounds, and they average between 1350 and 1450 feet per second.
Sure.
Right? So
Which
that's
is this number right here.
Yeah, that's your velocity. Very important. Now you can still get 3.5-inch rounds that will travel the same velocity with more pellets, where your ounces is going to be higher. The advantage is with 3.5-inch is that you can actually get higher velocity with less amount of shot in there. You can actually have an 1.25 ounce, 3 1/4 round, and it's going to increase your speed because the 3.5-inch does have more powder, but velocity is what kills ducks. Velocity is the most important.
Absolutely. And you talked about what the ounce rating means right here, and that is what dictates how many pellets are actually in the round, correct?
Correct. Yep.
And then that, of course, is based upon what size shot.
Yep. Larger the shot, fewer the pellets based on weight.
Right. And larger the shot, it actually works backwards in number. So if it's an 8 shot, smaller BBs, 1 shot a little bit larger, and then you even have your B, double B, and triple B shots.
Sure.
For these sea ducks, what would you suggest?
Probably, just because of the size of bird, I would probably shoot 2s or BBs. Now, if I shot BBs, I'd want a high weight. I'd want 1.5 maybe, because Heavy Shot does make that, and some of the other manufacturers that are out there. But you're getting a little. It's more important that you're putting your shot on target, but able to have enough pellets for that kill. 2s would probably be the perfect size, just because it'll accomplish a lot, and you actually end up with more BBs or more pellets that are actually in there. But 2s are probably perfect, and if I was struggling, meaning I'm getting hits, I know I'm taking feathers, I'm cutting the bird, and they're not coming down, that's when you want to increase the shot size up to a BB.